Hi, this is Marina from Darkstar Astrology with the lunar eclipse that is taking place on January the 31st at 11 degrees Leo. And this one's a really special one for me because I'm really interested in Ceres as an archetype, Persephone really, and because it's going to be conjunct Ceres. And when you look at the chart as well, there's Venus with the Sun opposite the Moon with Ceres, and of course because it's an eclipse, the North Node is in there as well. So I think this is going to be quite dramatic, and it also is continuing the Leo theme that continues from the one that we had last year in August, which was the big Regulus solar eclipse, which was very much divine masculine energy. This one is more the divine feminine, and it does have shades of the former eclipse, but it's less physically forceful. It still has courage, but withholds making any bold moves until the very last moment. So this lunar eclipse has regal stamped all over it, and it especially resonates with playing a very queenly backstage strategic role. So on a personal level, it makes us warm hosts who take control of any social situation, making sure that all guests are taken care of. The energy is great for organising people and events so that the flames of enthusiasm and conviviality forge long-standing alliances. Now, a good way to describe, or a good word rather, to describe this moon in Leo, Decan 2, is gracious, though in some cases it could be more like goodness gracious. Indulgence can become a problem if we lay on excessive compliments, gifts, and flattery to those we want to court favour with. The lunar eclipse can be a great benefactor for the arts and is a protector of children. The protective influence of the Great Mother Bear of Ursa Major is felt strongly in this decan, and this ramps up the mothering aspect of both the moon energy itself and the lunar eclipse's conjunction with super matriarch Ceres. Now, the moon does soothe down the roaring energy of Leo Decan 2 somewhat, but this decan is still regarded as being mouthy. That means that the eclipse's energy will be outspoken, fearless in its reasoning, and will dive into debates with gusto. This decan of Leo is ruled by Jupiter, so combining Zeus with the Lion King will create someone who relishes power and is very happy to give orders. So those ignited by this eclipse will then be accused of being bossy, but at the same time will be wonderful at organising when most people can't be bothered. You can rely on this lunar eclipse energy to cut the crap out of any chaos rather than just faffing around politely, not wanting to appear rude. A lunar eclipse in Leo 2 does tough love extraordinarily well, but sometimes makes enemies because of this. The roaring mouth of the lion combined with the super nanny energy of Ceres will never sugarcoat. So the star for this full moon lunar eclipse, it is a full moon as well, is Alpha Lynx in the constellation of Lynxus. Now, it's not one of the very known constellations because it's practically invisible in the sky, but the legend behind it is that this cat was originally King Lynxus, who was turned into a bobcat by Ceres, so there's a link with Ceres again, because he refused to teach the art of agriculture to his people. It seems that the arrogant king was rather jealous of the grain goddess's power over nature, so he killed her greatest and most respected farmer. The animal, the lynx, is associated with great sight and has luminous eyes. Well, you would need great sight to see this constellation, since that it's so faint. This was King Lynxus's punishment, not being able to shine. And also lynx are pretty much loners as well, so it's sort of a reserved feeling there. And, it's interesting that it is connected to Ceres, so I think that further activates the need to respect nature and natural law. And yes, you all know that I'm a big fan of natural law on this channel. So generally, with the moon conjunct Ceres, it's an aspect that is not easily swayed and will stick to its principles no matter what. This aspect can work like the matriarchal version of Sun conjunct Saturn, So at best, these are our wise elders who pass on their wisdom to the young and serve as respected mentors in the wider world. Command may seem overly strict, but it's also a true case of tough love. They get very positive results when others have failed through patience and pragmatism. There is a priestess herbalist side to Ceres as well. They're not hardcore materialists then. So this energy can be used very much for healing the world. A Ceres lunar eclipse supports ecologists, healers, charity workers and hostesses, while it also has a very strong work ethic. Now, the moon opposite Venus will bring a bit of zest to what otherwise would be a very soft, compliant custard pie combination. Custard pie. Having the two most feminine bodies in astrology in opposition makes for an interesting tug of war between the glamorous but impossibly vain lover and the caring, self-sacrificial mother. Those touched by this lunar eclipse then could feel torn between their loving, mothering duties and the satisfaction of their sensual desires. Generally, a lunar eclipse is a kind of supermenstrual wolf howler version of the full moon. So it gives us the opportunity to really purge and release things from our lives that no longer serve our higher selves. The bright light of the sun throws a spotlight on our subconscious to illuminate any issues within our primary relationships that have been festering there since the previous solar eclipse, which, as I mentioned, was back in August. With the lunar eclipse, the Earth comes between the sun and the moon. So sometimes we get a blood red moon as the Earth's shadow slowly creeps along its crater face. So depending on how things have gone in the last 6 months, we can now see the fruit blossom from the seeds we planted at the last solar eclipse. But if life has been stressful for us, put pressure on those embryonic seeds, then that, what should be a birthing time, can sadly turn into a miscarriage. I know that's kind of harsh words, but that's basically what happens if your seeds don't take root. Your personal lunar experience depends on how the eclipse is configured to your chart and how you handle change in general. So the effect of a lunar eclipse can last up to 3 months, and this can be a somber but cleansing and healing time or a joyous birthing time. Eclipses get their bad reputation because humans are creatures of habit and become upset by the unexpected. So if you have been stubbornly resisting growth, then yes, you could experience this lunar eclipse as a really volcanic, violent energy that desperately needs to be purged. But really, it shouldn't be dreaded. And since this eclipse has the Ceres connection, I don't think it's going to be a harsh purge. It could be something that you take, like you take herbs and to relieve your colon or something, do some kind of colon cleanse. But generally, yes, lunar eclipses are extremely emotional times. Therefore, we really need to sit down quietly and listen to what comes up, for our feelings are our psychic barometer. So unashamedly bawl your eyes out if you have to, and allow for the red eyes with this blood red moon. Don't fear the tears, for they are sacred, salty purification. So at this lunar eclipse, the environment or culture is quite a big theme. And I say culture in the sense that it's what surrounds a cell in a petri dish. Luxury and indulgence are also amplified. And there is a need possibly to forego the immediate stimulation of the senses in favour of one's duty to nurture the sick. And some aspects of what is popular culture these days are indeed sick. Now, with Venus being on the south node, the arse end of the dragon, it will tend to bring out the worst side of the planet that it touches. So this Aphrodite can be vain, narcissistic and shallow. And if we couple Venus's vanity with negative Ceres's smothering approach to loving, you could end up with a bunny boiling situation. And so this is not a great eclipse to have an affair. If you happen to be in the midst of one, then there's a danger of being caught with your pants down. So a case of handbags at dawn. If you're not careful, lovers might find that their sweetheart is actually married or a spouse discovers an affair. This is because lunar eclipses have the habit of bringing secrets to the surface. So to boil it down, really, there's definitely the archetypes of the seductive but shallow lover versus the dutiful but dull spouse. I know it's a cliche, but they're hard to ignore really when you have Sun, Venus, South Node in exciting and rebellious Aquarius versus the Moon, Ceres, North Node in stately Leo. I mean, it's stately really. So the official spouse has the winning hand though, so give up gracefully if you were the master or the mistress. So in the mundane world, there could be some, well, slut shaming basically, which I know is an ugly term, but, you know, Leo Decan 2 is mouthy and I can't see the official queen going down without a fight. If her Henry VIII wants a new model, that is. This works also in the business world too, where a boss might want to rebrand and replace their scruffy old but wise staff with shiny new hipsters. Again, this eclipse means any forced redundancies will be very vocal about their plight. Another possibility is that there is an attempt to replace a lovely old building with some modern carbuncle. The environment theme will ensure that there will be protests at any schemes that are not in keeping with the rest of the town's architecture. The victorious solution will have nature and classical proportions on its side. So this is not an eclipse for jagged and bony high tech, but for feline, yielding and curvaceous landscapes. So yes, the theme of this eclipse is the connection to the land and being sympathetic to the land. And this ties in with the whole global agenda, doesn't it? Because when you have a connection, we all have a connection to the homeland, you know? We all have a special, I think we have a special, well, we do better basically with the food that comes from the area that our kind of ethnic group and family come from, because, you know, your body adapts to eating that food over many generations. And, you know, someone from southern India tends to be more vegetarian and they don't do well with too much meat. Whereas if you go to the north of Europe, I think it tends to be that the Anglo-Saxons do quite well on meat, you know, on a meat heavy and a fat heavy diet. So the whole paleo thing, which I tried to do, there's basically three groups of diets, and one is the very much the paleo diet, then the other is the vegetarian, but also with a bit of bread, quite a lot of bread and carbs, and then there's the someone who's kind of in between who does well with both, and I'm one of those does well with both type people, and it's probably just because of the area where I come from. And I think the same with any ethnic group, and the problem with multiculturalism is that you can basically try food from all over the world all the time, and of course the food is imported as well, which means it loses its connection with the sun because it's ripening in transit. You know, it's so bloody obvious when you look at natural law that we do better in the environment where we are genetically, our genetic makeup is for that environment. So, you know, I don't like the cold in England, really. I do better in a southern European climate. I do, but my dad and my grandparents emigrated to England. But that's still within Europe. Now, I can't imagine coming from sub-Saharan Africa to Sweden. I mean, I don't know. And also, just things like vitamin D, you know, you don't get much vitamin D up there because of the sunlight. So, and the darker your skin, the less vitamin D you're getting through the skin. So there's all these practical reasons why migrations are difficult. What interested me though, what got my goat this week was I was watching, I do like his videos. He's called Mazzaman, and he does sort of 10-minute studies of different ethnic groups around the world. And the last video he did was about Australia and how it's fast becoming a very diverse place, where it used to be pretty much, I think, 90%, not even just white, 90% Northern European English, very British, actually. I think there was some Dutch as well, but definitely Northern European. And now it's getting very mixed up. But I noticed in the comments there was a lot of anger about it. So he was sort of seeing it as a positive thing, but the comments weren't seeing it too positively. And then there was some comments about, you colonized, and that's so many Aborigines suffered, and they did. I mean, it's an odd thing. Why do they take the children away from them and then try and educate them separately? You see what I mean? This kind of breakup of the family thing. But if it was wrong then, why is it right now? All of a sudden, colonization in a different form is okay. But then, yes, I know people are going to say, yes, but it was done by force, and these immigrants now, they're not coming and doing anything using force to do it. But they don't need to, because we've all been conditioned not to rise up against it. Otherwise we're bigots. But obviously, when the first migrations took place from Portugal to the Americas, well, when they arrived, of course, the natives, this is a natural thing to do, is, oh my God, invaders, we don't want them here, attack. So that's why force had to be used back, because the natives were protecting their land. And that's normal, that's fine. So the natives of any country are going to resist immigration, because that's a natural feeling. It's a natural survival instinct, because they know that in time there's going to be more and more of them. They're going to have more kids. They'll be slowly replaced. And so this happens everywhere in the world. It's if you look at any history of people around the world, there could be a drought, so people will have to move from that area and move to a more lush area. But of course, when these tribes move up to another area, do you think the other tribes are going to go, oh, you poor thing, you had a drought, you come and take part and have half of our resources? No, they bloody fought. So it's just a normal reaction everywhere, and everyone around the world does it. The only thing, I guess, with the Anglos who did it was that they had weaponry, they had superior, IQ, so that they could easily overpower the natives. And that's the thing, they were just better at it. But there's definitely a different mindset between someone who's a colonist, who is a pioneer, I guess, than the sort of people who stay behind. Because some people just don't want to leave their land. Some people are, they're more Saturnian, I guess, and they will stay and they will fight, even if they're under attack from other tribes. They'll fight to keep their land, and they don't want to leave their land. So they're the conservatives, or they don't want to move too far from their land. But then there are people who will happily up sticks and go somewhere totally different, and they have a different mindset. Now, I guess these would be the globalists, because they want to travel between countries easily. The whole thing with the European Union as well. It's like, oh, I don't want to have to change my currency. I just want to be able to travel around. And these are transients. Now, I've nothing against transients. That's fine, but they have less of a loyalty to the land. And when you think about, areas where, and I've seen this in England, there's always parts of, there are places that has a very sort of quick turnover of people, and they're not the safest areas, and they're also the places where no one really looks after their home because they're not going to be in there for very long, that they're just passing by. And in astrology, this is called peregrine. It's like a planet that isn't in its home, and it's just a wanderer. And it's funny, like last week I was talking about not fitting in anywhere, but this is a kind of similar thing, but and it can be a negative thing as well. It can be a positive thing in the sense that you can, you're a facilitator. You're like a mercurial person who joins the dots and can sort of see both sides. But if you don't commit to anything ever, then you end up being a kind of nothing. So there needs to be an anchor at some point. You can't just be a sort of anchorous ship around, and the people that cause the most trouble are the ones who never put roots down, and which leads me to the Khazars. Now I don't really know, these are the people I don't really know who the hell they are or what to believe anymore, because apparently the history of this has been very much suppressed, or people say it's been debunked, that this is a fake story and it's anti-Semitic. But they're not even Semitic, so I don't even get how that can be the case. But apparently their descendants are ruling the world. Okay, so that's what they're doing. And the thing is, if these tribe, or this particular tribe doesn't exist, or it's a fake story, but this makes it even more fakey, because then they're also fake Semitics, really. If it's fake, then how come when you do a DNA test, they specify there's 2 different types of this tribe? And I know because I did a test, and I have 10% Sephardic Jew. And that comes from, because of Sicily and Malta, I think it's my grandmother is Maltese. There's a bit of a question over my grandfather because this dirty woman had a few different lovers. So we don't know. I don't know. That's why I did the test, because I wanted to find out who my grandfather was, because there's a question mark over that. And she said that my mum's father was this Persian prince, And so I thought, I've got some Iranian in me. So that's what I wanted to find out. But instead, the first test, all right, I'm going to come out here. The first test was with, okay, here we go. My heritage, and I didn't know this, but they're based in Israel, which is interesting. And this test came back. I was really pleased, actually, because I didn't know how bloody Greek I was. I mean, I knew the Greeks had invaded Sicily, but I didn't realise that the highest percentage I had was 33% Greek, 32% Italian. But then here's where it gets really weird. Then it was North and West European, 2%, 1% Ashkenazi Jewish, then North African, 14%, and then 10% Sephardic Jewish. So, and also 6% from West Asia, which is, I think that's the Iran. So I thought, well, what? I didn't even know that there was I kind of knew there was a difference between the Sephardics and the Ashkenazi. And I know that they were the ones from Spain, and they sort of went through North Africa. So, but what was really strange was then I got a phone call from them about a couple of weeks later. Maybe they were trying to sell me, another package to go with it. But I just thought it was kind of strange, because the first thing they said was, "Oh, that's quite a mix, Ashkenazi Jew." And I was like, "Well, hang on, it's only 1%." And also Sephardic Jewish. And I went, "Yeah, I know, but I just thought it was a really strange thing. They didn't mention anything else but just those 2, and they're based in Israel." They're trying to make me join the tribe or something. They said, well, how do you feel about that? And I went, yes, it was great. It's fine. And they said, no surprises there then? And I went, no, not really. Because I thought, well, why are they asking me all these questions? And I actually did read up that Malta had quite a large percentage of Sephardic Jews there, but they converted to Catholic. So I kind of knew. And my mum looks extremely like Amy Winehouse, who's Jewish. So, I mean, I kind of knew. So it wasn't really that much of a surprise. But I just thought that was odd. But then, you see, I did another test and the Jewish side completely disappeared. So where did they go? So the second test is based in Austin, Texas, and this is Ancestry. That one was a bit more general. So I got 72% Europe South and 13% Caucasus. I thought, what the heck is Caucasus? And apparently it's the region of Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. Okay. So that's quite a high percentage, 13. And maybe that's where the Jews went, the Jew genes that I had earlier. And then 5% Africa North. So that's kind of different. I mean, the major thing is, I'm 2/3 Europe South. And of course, there's going to be migration and invasions and stuff from those nearby places. So that kind of accounts, I think that kind of accounts for Malta, really. But my point is that there's a lot of talk about, the elites, and we're not supposed to mention who they are. Who are these elites? They're obviously very high IQ and very intelligent, because otherwise they wouldn't be in the elite thing. And then let's talk about this sort of blue bloodlines. And so then, of course, it's going to be the aristocracy and it's going to be the royalty. And so this is where I guess the whole kind of white privilege comes from, because we're not talking about all white people, are we? I think the white privilege, it's pretty much stereotypical Anglo-Saxon, or quite Germanic, quite Aryan looking. It's not really Southern Europe. I mean, really, apparently in America, I think the Italians weren't even counted as white at some point, nor were the Irish, which is a bit strange, because they were actually made slaves too. So this elite group are basically the Anglos, and they've been kind of blamed for everything. But then I listened to some of this history of Khazarians, and apparently they infiltrated the aristocracy at some point. And when you hear sort of the history of where they kind of went and all the revolutions that happened and colonization and blah, 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 they seem to have a lot to do with it. But the thing is, if you say it's the British, the evil British that went to America, to India, and that's never questioned. No one ever has a go at you for saying the evil colonizing British. But if you mention it's also this other tribe of the Khazars, that's really bad. Apparently, you can't mention them, and so it's very strange, isn't it? Well, David Icke did really talk about it quite a lot when he mentions, he goes on about, the banksters basically and the Rothschilds and how they really are the sort of original Khazars. But they're masters of disguise. So it's very hard to pin them down. What bugs me is the alt-right thing about the JQ. They're not very specific in their JQ. I mean, they are we including the Sephardics? my 10% is protesting there. We're not including the Ethiopian Jews, are we? No. And we're probably not including the Hasidic ones either, because you don't see them like running Israel, and you don't see them running the banks either, because they seem to be mainly religious. So it is a certain type mixed with a certain type of inbred Anglo as well. So it's a sort of blue blood Khazar mix, I think, that we should be looking at, because we need to know how can we how can we fight against them if we don't know who they are. I mean, they're very good at they're good at this divide and conquer thing, and I don't want to be doing any divide and conquer here either, and that's one thing I need to make that clear. But you still have to kind of know, and I don't want to talk too much about the Khazars, but and I know that it's been debunked, but I don't know if it has really been debunked, because the history writers, this part of history is very vague, and since these types, the KM, somebody calls them the Khazar Mafia, that's a very good word for it, because, you know, coming from Sicily, I know about the mafia and how important certain families, you know, these families can become very powerful because it's that they're looking after each other, and you know, it's in group preference, and so we can talk about them, and there's enough films about how awful the Sicilian mafia were, and rightly so, they were. So we have to call out other mafias as well, without being too afraid. So I think it's good to. It's not. We have to not fall into that trap of demonizing all Semitics because of this little kind of weirdo tribe within them who aren't actually Semitic. And if people say, no, but they are because DNA tests have proven that, well, I don't know if they are, because if so, why are there two different categories in these DNA tests? Why is there a separate one for Ashkenazi to Sephardic? You know, why? So there's obviously a distinct thing. And also, isn't that weird that they're very vague with everything else? But these two particular groups are very specific. Like, you don't get much granularity in North Africa, for example. Like, for the first test, you know, North Africa is massive. Like, there's no distinction between. There must be some difference between Egyptians and Tunisians and Moroccans. They're not all the same. And then there's the Berbers, and you don't get a section for that at all. Yet these two tribes, well, I guess, yeah, because one's part of Europe, DNA, and the other's part of North Africa, which are the Sephardics. So very interesting. But I want to explore this a little bit more, because, you know, if we're always talking about the elites. I want to know who these elites are. And anyway, elites is such a. Somebody said, "Oh, that's too much. That's too nice a name for them." And instead, you know, other. I was going to talk about this as well. The other, you know, the shadow, the boogeyman. Everybody's got a boogeyman, haven't they? And you know, for the alt-right, it's the JQ. For the neocons, it's the Arabs, and, you know, everybody's got one. And then if we look at the sort of UFO people, there's the reptilians. They take their boogeyman completely off planet. So, you know, there's whatever it is, there is a boogeyman, whoever it is, and is always the other, and it's always a real baddie, and it's always got kind of slitty eyes and looks a little bit green, and it looks like the devil. Yeah, for the Christians, it's the devil. So it's always projected, isn't it? Whatever. So with the thing with getting back to this lunar eclipse. I did do a very long post about Ceres, and I'm probably going to do a podcast on that, I think, because that talks about the triad, the dark triad, which is to do with narcissism and the whole dividing and conquer thing that narcissistic parents do, with one child being the scapegoat and the other being the golden child. And there's that that division of three again, which happens. And it's, it's like the Abrahamic religions. It's the same thing. It's divided into three. And it seems to me that, that the Christians are always pitted against the Muslims all the time. So is the narcissistic parent this kind of the third one? I don't know. So yeah, it's very funny, very strange. And one more thing as well, this whole thing about IQ, this is another thing that bothered me about the alt-right, because they will say, oh, well, the reason that Western countries do so well is because they've got high IQ, we've got high IQ, and it's not white privilege, it's just that we are, we've got higher IQ. But then what about the Khazars, who've got even higher IQ on average? Maybe that's why they do well. Maybe they're not evil at all. Maybe they just got very high IQ and they work really hard. So what do you do with that? Is it a conspiracy, or are they just really, really intelligent? And all we have to do is try and just outsmart them and cultivate our intelligence as well, and not lose our intelligence by, well, you see, they keep it in the bloodline. No. So maybe that's why there's such an agenda to not keep it in our bloodline, and to make us all multicultural. So mix it up, and then the IQ will be spread around, and it won't concentrate in one area, because you don't want that IQ to concentrate. Otherwise, it's going to get higher, and then there's a competition with another high IQ tribe. And anyway, you don't want that, because that's eugenics. Oh! So, what's good for the goose is not good for the gander, apparently. Okay, so that went off on a bit of a tangent. I have to say thanks so much for all your support and all the emails and all the comments after the last video, and I hope this one hasn't been too much. I'm just going to put it out and hold my breath and see if the Google aliens come down on me like a ton of bricks. We'll see. But, I haven't said anything negative about Islam, have I? But actually, it seems to me that people who are really over the top going on about Islam they're not really actually suppressed, strangely. So what they like to do is terrify us with tales of very gory things that have happened in terrorist attacks, and one wonders how much of it is really true. I mean, I know there's definitely a cultural issue with it, but the kind of bloodthirsty that you're terrorized by this thing. And yet then you're gagged and said you're not, and told you're not supposed to speak out against it. So it's like you're in a real bind, really. So yeah, well, let's scare you, but you're not allowed to scream. Ridiculous. So yeah, that's my rant for the lunar eclipse. And I just want to say thanks so much for all the support. Like I said in the comments, it's been great, because when I first started coming out about my opinions of what's been going on politically, there were some really nasty trolling type comments, but I don't get that anymore. Not at all. And instead, I just keep getting so much. It's like, God, I'm so relieved you said that. Because of the way the media is set. It's but the more you think about the fact that they are really a very small percentage of humanity even, but they got the loudest voices. So we, the majority, are wising up. And that's very much a Ceres theme as well, because, Persephone, Ceres, they are the same kind of archetype. There's a certain naivety about them. And mainly it's to do with thinking everyone's as honest as they are. So when somebody says something over the news, you believe it. Well, we used to. But now the media, the percentage of people that actually believe the mass media is at an all-time low. And it's all thanks to YouTube. So aliens... Thanks for the broadcasting opportunity. And it's a double-edged sword, really, So happy lunar eclipse in Leo. And I've been mouthy, haven't I? If you want more of that, please support me on Patreon. You can click on the link on the screen somewhere. And come over to Darkstar Astrology for more astrology, and thanks for your support. All the best. Bye-bye.